Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Thanks for joining me today. Today's episode is a bit off topic from parent and adult child estrangement. We will be discussing sibling estrangement. This has been coming up more and more in my conversations with others regarding estrangement, either with professionals, with my coaching clients, emails I receive, etc. And it actually hits home and is something personal to me. So I wanted to give it space and open up the conversation about this. I believe it is just as important as our relationships between parent and adult child. Maybe even more so because the relationship we have with our siblings is lifelong, much longer than we have with our parents for the most part. Not in every case, but for most folks. And when we are estranged from our siblings, it adds another layer in different ways to our lives of shame and lack of trust, etc. And so I wanted to dive into that today. And I'll begin with two quotes. Conflict is like a root that can either grow a fragrant flower or a poisonous weed, depending on how it is tended. It can either be the catalyst of awakening or the catalyst of war. And that is by Teal Swan. The second is lack of love from parents often motivates their children to go searching for love in other relationships. This search is often misguided and leads to further disappointment. And that is by Gary Chapman. So, sibling estrangement. There was once a time when I was also estranged from my only sibling. I have a younger sister, and we have spent a good portion of our lives, adult lives together, being estranged. And the longest time we were ever estranged has to do with an experience that our family had. I will not go into details because it's not my story to tell. However, know that it did involve my children and or my child and a person my sister was married to. So I will leave it at that. My sister and I have since come back into relationship with one another. And while I say we are in relationship with one another, we do not have a close relationship. We go months, if not a year or so, without speaking to one another. And it's not because we are purposely not speaking to one another. It's because we're not close. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, as to reasons why sometimes siblings become estranged from one another. So, in my particular case, there was a lot of favoritism in my family by my parents. Our parents were divorced when I was 5, and my sister was 2. And yes, for those who have been listening to the podcast for any length of time and know or are my coaching clients, you know that my parents have remarried and they are married today. However, they originally divorced when I was 5 and my sister was 2. And when my parents struggled with, a divorce, they were not good co-parents to one another, and it caused a lot of discord, a lot of anger, and all sorts of horrific words exchanged, etc. And because I was 5, I had a clearer understanding, 5 and 6 versus my sister who was 2 and 3, of kind of what was happening. And I tended to gravitate more towards my dad, and my sister, obviously, as a toddler at the time, really gravitated towards my mom. And my parents, looking back on it today, really did not do much that I know of to encourage something different. They didn't necessarily purposely set out to devise and make it a divisive situation, but I don't recall them ever doing anything that worked extra hard at trying to bring us together. So my sister is much like my mom, and I am much like my dad. So I gravitated towards my dad because I felt seen, heard, and validated by my dad. My sister gravitated towards my mom because she felt seen, heard, and validated by my mom. And therein laid the groundwork for sibling rivalry and the toxicity of favoritism when it comes to the relationship between my sister and I. My mother, I believe, just really, I've said it before on the podcast, my mother just really did not know what to do with me. I was, in her words, described when I was young as a very angry child. And she had no idea why I was angry, did not know how to deal with anger, did not want to deal with anger, and therefore, um, more or less kind of let me do my own thing. My sister was the complete opposite. I was also an introvert. I would have preferred sitting on the sofa or in my bedroom reading a book as opposed to being out doing things. And my sister was very much a social butterfly, and she, was out doing events and activities and things like that. And it was like pulling teeth to get me to do those things. And my mother just didn't know what to do with that. She just literally didn't know what to do with it. So life goes on, and my mom ends up favoring my sister, my dad favors me, and my sister looks at me and wants to know why her dad, I'm imagining, because my sister and I have not had a conversation about this. My sister is not one to venture into difficult conversations. There is a very significant conversation that I feel that we need to have regarding past events in our lives, with our own adult families, and she has refused to do that thus far. I'm not afraid of having difficult conversations, and so it is a block that is between the two of us right now. So the contact that we do have with one another is rather superficial. It's about grandkids and how's the family doing, Merry Christmas, Happy Easter, and that's about the extent of it. So, but my parents nurtured this division between the two of us. My sister never went to my dad's house on the weekends when I went, so she never really spent time with him. Um, my mom didn't push that. My dad was angry at my mom for not insisting that my sister go on weekend visitations with him. And today they are not close at all in any stretch of the imagination. Um, my sister still remains very close with my mom. And while I have been building a relationship with my mom, I am still much closer to my dad. So, why am I sharing all of this with you? It is not to hang my dirty laundry out there. Everything that I do and share on this podcast about my own personal stories is to help educate others, to help give you an insight as to why things may not be working in your life, why things may have gone off the rails, and then how to get them back on the rails if possible. So when we have children, and as we know, as I've talked about before, we parent all of our children differently. As much as people want to tell me and try to convince me that they love their children equally and they treat their children equally, that is simply false. Plain and simple. It can't be, because your children are different people. So while your intention may be to do that, that is generally not what happens. And so because you relate to one child easier, better than the other child, this can cause, from the child's perspective, a feeling of, my mom doesn't love me, my dad doesn't love me, my other parent loves me more, my other parent cares about me more, right? And so they gravitate towards that parent and then begin to take on some of the things and characteristics of that parent in how they relate to the other child, right? Um, I held a grudge against my sister for decades as an adult because I felt, and this was all pre my own estrangement with my kids, I felt that my sister was just, you know, an entitled brat. That was my opinion of her. And today I look at that very differently. I see that my sister was a product of her raising, was a product of her environment. And while, yes, she's an adult now and she could make very different choices, I also understand she doesn't know me and I don't know her. Yes, we know who each other are. We know, a little bit about the interest of the other person, but we don't really know one another. I think both she and I would agree that we know our best friends better than we know our own sibling. And so this builds resentment. It breeds resentment between siblings when they feel that one parent favors another one. And that favoritism, from their perspective, it's favoritism. From your perspective as a parent, it might be just that, oh my gosh, I don't favor this kid over the other one. I just get along better with this one over here. This one over here makes my life easy. This one over there just makes, me want to pull my hair out all the time because I can't figure out what to do, what I'm supposed to say, how I'm supposed to do it. It's just a challenge all the time. But your kid is not seeing it like that. Your kid is seeing either this other sibling or these other siblings are getting all of your attention, all of your time, right? My mom, I can remember very vividly. I mean, I am a week away from my 54th birthday, and I can recall an incident sitting at our table, me asking going over my report card with my mom that night, and then asking for help with my homework, and her making reference to, "Well, you get all A's and B's. I don't need to help you. I need to help your sister over here because she gets C's and D's." And while that may not seem like a very big deal to an adult, it's a massive deal to a child who is wanting the support of her parent, the child who does need help and is asking for help and has basically been told, "You get A's and B's, figure it out for yourself." So, the easiest thing to do, because a child is dependent upon the parent for survival, because a child can't, go buy groceries and put a roof over their head, the easiest person to attack is the sibling. Oh, it's her fault. If she weren't here, I'd have all the attention. If it weren't for her, my mom wouldn't be telling me to figure it out for myself. So we then breed this "I can't stand my sister" attitude, or my sibling, or what have you. And then when a parent, as was in my case, a parent sees you start acting that way, of not liking your sibling, well, then you're shamed for that. "She's your sister. Stop acting that way. Shame on you. You hurt your sister's feelings." So now you've added shame to the mix. And again, people, I'm not telling you these things, and I have never done them. The reason I'm telling you these things is because I've done them, and or I experienced them. So I'm not saying I'm any better than anyone else. I did the exact same things with my kids. And my girls, for the longest time, may as well have been estranged from one another. They are not like that now. They have really a very close relationship now. But we have sibling, what can then, all of this leads into sibling estrangement down the road, right? Where we go our separate ways, where we're like, "I don't want to have anything to do with her. She's just this whacked weird thing." And I'm sure my sister thinks that I'm just this off the wall, black sheep of the family, can't get it together, can't figure out how to, do things the way that everybody else does them. And therefore I am forever upsetting the apple cart kind of thing. So here we are, we found ourselves estranged for years. And what did that estrangement do to me? I can't speak for her side. I can speak for my side. And a lot of it are the exact same things that happen when we are estranged as parents from our kids, and kids from their parents. So trust, right? Trust is broken, in any restraint estrangement. It can cause emotional withdrawal, defense. Oh my God, I was so defensive, and defensive posturing, people pleasing behaviors, um, having unsustainable relationships because you're over eager to develop a close relationship because you didn't have a close relationship with your parents, and you didn't have a close relationship with siblings. And so you move out into the world, and then you're desperate to have a close relationship with anyone. And oftentimes that any one person comes along and is not necessarily the best person for us, right? We and because then we have a lack of trust, then we have a really hard time building friendships. And for me, I that was a huge thing for me. I did not trust people easily, and did not have friends, really close friends for a long time. Um, just didn't. Um, Self esteem takes a hit, right? If I'm unlovable if my sister doesn't love me and want to spend time with me. So who else would, right? I, are you hearing the common themes with, if you're a parent and or, an adult child in estrangement? And then family, right? Choosing sides. Oftentimes when we are estranged from a sibling, we feel that other people in our family should choose our side and stick with us. And the other sibling feels the same way. And then you also can have siblings who then, try to get folks aligned with them, and it resorts in bullying and accusations and attacks, and it just can get really, really, really nasty. And for parents of children who are estranged from one another, it presents an entirely different scenario as well, because then there's this, for instance, if there's a family, get together, a birthday celebration or the holidays, and then it's like, well, if I go to one kid's house because both kids can't be in the same room together, then am I showing allegiance to one child over the other child, right? And it kind of puts them in the middle of not knowing what they should do, not knowing if they should talk about the other child to the other sibling, to not, all of these things. It really can wreak havoc on the family as a whole. And um, and then there's, sometimes there can be rumination. What did I do? How did, some of us ask, how did I get here? What was my role in this? How can I fix it? Can I fix it? Because we're desperately trying to find meaning around an experience that doesn't have a good explanation for it, right? And that rumination it kind of then circles back around to the trust and friendship thing, because the more you ruminate, the more you talk about things and oversharing and bitter thoughts and, all the whys and victimhood that we can get into with that. And then people want to distance themselves from us because they don't want to hear it. And so then we lose trust in that, and then we don't have friends, and it's just this vicious merry-go-round that we're on. So how did my sister and I come back together? Um, I did my work. She did not. I talk about this all the time on the podcast, in my support groups, and with my clients. My sister, to my knowledge, has never, as an adult, been to a therapist. She has not done inner work on herself. And I did. I did that work, and I was the one that did the reach out to my sibling. And she accepted. I have to give her that, she accepted. Um, but I also went into that knowing what my expectation was. My expectation was not that we would have a close relationship, was not that we were going to be best buds, was not that we were going to have deep conversations, was not that we were going to heal all of the hurts of the past. I simply wanted to have my sister in my life on some level. And so I take and accept the level of communication that she is willing and able to give. And that equates to what I said at the beginning of this episode. Merry Christmas, Happy Easter. Here's the newest grandkid. Hope you're well. Is it what I would want? No. Is it less than what I would want? Absolutely. I would love to have a close relationship with my sister, but it's not possible. Not right now. And it may never be possible. She may never be in that place to have that kind of a relationship with me. And while that hurts and brings tears to my eyes right now talking about it, I can't change her. The only person I have control over is me. And that means I have to decide if the relationship that we do have is one that I can live with. And for me, it's worth that for me. I'm hopeful that we can one day have a closer relationship, but I don't think that that will be possible until our parents are deceased, because there's still too much favoritism shown in the family right now. And I think that it just leads to bitter feelings. So, um, and when I want to make one comment about something my daughter said to me one day, and I think it's super important for parents. I know this isn't necessarily related to sibling estrangement, but I think it's super important for parents to hear this and understand. It's an example of the power of words and language, and what you think your kids aren't paying attention to, or what you think might not be a big deal. So I was over at my one daughter's house one day, and she said something. We were all sitting around talking, and she said something. And when she said it, I immediately thought, "Oh my God, that looks she her mannerisms are just like my sister." And so I said to her, "Oh my gosh, you look just like my sister when you did that." Right? And I called my sister by name. And my daughter said, "Don't ever tell me that again." And I was so taken aback. I was like, "Oh my gosh, what why would she why would she say that to me?" And I'm sure the look on my face said that. And she put her finger up and she said, "I know how you feel about your sister. I don't want you to compare me to her like that." So she knew. And again, she had not at that point in time in the conversation, it was post estrangement. We had been reconciled, but she was not really clear on the relationship that my sister and I now have. But she was going based off of old things, our old relationship, and the things that I used to say about my sister and how much I did not like her. And so by me saying, "Oh my gosh, you look just like my sister when you did or said blah blah blah," she took that as a negative thing because she knew how I once felt about my sister. So the power of your words is, I cannot stress to you how important it is. And the things that your kids are listening to, whether it's about them, about their sibling, about their father, their mother, their whomever, they're paying attention to your words and how you feel about others. So be mindful of that in your conversations. I now speak very differently about my sister for that very reason. So I believe I will leave it there. If you would like more episodes on different types of estrangement, such as sibling estrangement, or other types of estrangement with friends and things like that, I'm happy to entertain podcast episodes on that. Just let me know. Let me know your thoughts on this. And please, if you are a sibling that is estranged, know that my heart is with you. It's a very tough situation to be in. It is painful, and remains with us every day, whether we focus on it or not. My heart is with you. Until next time. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show or following us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.